Senator Billick.
I'm happy to let Senator Wong take a turn at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Senator Billick. Senator Wong.
Thank you, Chair. Professor Triggs, if I could return you to the meeting about which you gave evidence when Senator Collins was asking questions, and you indicated you had a meeting with Mr Moratis, some 4 weeks ago, and you said the purpose of the meeting was to deliver a request from the Attorney-General for your resignation. And I just want to take you back to that meeting and just first ask you, whereabouts was that?
It was in my office in Sydney.
And how were you advised that the meeting would occur?
I believe that my assistant received a phone call to ask if I would be available to meet with Mr Moratis on, in fact, it was, we believe, the 3rd of February.
You received the phone call on the 3rd, or the meeting occurred on the 3rd?
The meeting occurred on the 3rd. I think the phone call was a day before.
Right. And were you advised at that time of the purpose of the meeting?
No, I was not.
And was this, I think this, you said this was the first time you'd had a meeting with him?
No, in fact, that's not quite true. Right. On the 29th of January, shortly after Mr Moratis had started his new position, I did make a courtesy visit to his office in Canberra. So that was the 29th of January. It was very informal. There was no particular agenda. It was a relatively short courtesy visit. In fact, given the relatively recent nature of that courtesy visit on the 29th of January, I was, of course, a little surprised to have a meeting with him on the 3rd of February.
Right. And at that stage, prior to the meeting commencing, did you have any knowledge of what was intended, what the purpose of the meeting was?
No, my administrative assistant was not told the purpose of the meeting, although I believe she asked.
About how long did the meeting last?
It lasted for about an hour.
Right. Okay. And can you tell me what Mr Moratis said to you in that meeting?
Senator Wong, with respect, I feel that the content of that discussion is one that should be a matter of discussion, a question for the attorney.
Senator Wong, I'm happy. Sorry if it helps, and thank you very much for that, Professor Triggs. Given that Professor Triggs has told the committee the substance of the meeting rather than the detail, I'm perfectly happy for both her and for Mr Moratis to be asked and to respond to questions from you or other senators about that meeting.
So I'm going to ask you some questions, Professor Triggs. Can you tell me what was said by Mr Moratis to you at that meeting?
Yes, he said he'd been asked to deliver the message from the attorney that he required my resignation.
Did he explain why?
No.
Did you ask why?
Yes, and he told me that no reason had been given. Apart from... Well, no, I said, what is the reason for this request? And he said, I believe, that he had no detail as to the basis for it.
What else was said in the meeting?
Well, I gave him my answer, and I explained why I gave that answer.
And what was your answer? Well,
my answer was that I have a 5-year statutory position which is designed for the President of the Human Rights Commission specifically to avoid political interference in the exercise of my tasks under the Australian Human Rights Commission Act.
Did the Secretary indicate that this was a personal request from the attorney?
He did.
And was the phrase "required your resignation" used?
I don't recall if the word "required" was used, but I do know that my resignation was asked for.
And was there any discussion of, you've referenced the reason for the 5-year term, which in part, as you identify, is to avoid political interference. Was there any discussion in that meeting of a perception of political interference?
No, we didn't discuss that. I just simply reiterated that I have a 5-year position that is deliberately protected by statute so that I would not be vulnerable to a request for my resignation in light, in this case, of it being just a few days before the release of the report into the Forgotten Children.
Ms Triggs, in that meeting, did Mr Moratis indicate to you that there would be some other opportunity available to you if you resigned?
He did.
What were the words used, if I may ask?
I don't recall the precise words, but I know that he said that I would be offered other work with the government in a, I don't know that he used the word, but some sort of advisory capacity that would be relevant to my expertise as an international lawyer.
What did you understand him to be suggesting?
Well, that's a matter, I guess, for you to answer, if you will. Senator
Very
Triggs,
similar to
but-
many questions Senator O'Sullivan has put to the witness. But answer it as you see fit.
Yes,
Professor.
I understood him to suggest that because I had particular experience and skills in other aspects of international law, those skills could be used by the government for contemporary legal problems, and that were I to agree to resign, I would have the opportunity to work in those other areas.
That's your understanding of what was said, not what was said to you.
It was definitely said to me that an offer would be made for me to provide work for the government in areas of my expertise.
Were any grounds for the request or the direction requirement for your resignation indicated?
No, none at all.
None at all. Was there any discussion of the Forgotten Children inquiry?
I don't recall that we discussed that in particular, though obviously I drew my own conclusions.
Was there any discussion of the Prime Minister's comments about you?
No, and I'm not sure about the timing, to be perfectly honest. It might have been that comment by the Prime Minister was after, but I've frankly forgotten the chronology.
Sorry, Professor Triggs.
It was after, I'm told, yes. So there would have been no discussion then.
Which comment by the Prime Minister?
Well, the Prime Minister made comments both in Parliament and, I believe, to the media, in which he challenged the wisdom of the Commission in holding the inquiry and made other remarks that were obviously indicating that he was extremely unhappy with the report in relation to the children in detention, and I think he went further than that.
But on another occasion, if I recall, he also said that you were a decent person, and I think the attorney, although we'll come to it later, said similar things as well. That's why I'm just trying to clarify particularly which comment.
Yes, well, there were various comments made by the Prime Minister and the attorney, initially of a rather flattering nature, and ultimately very ones that did not respect my office or the work of the Commission.
So, Ms Triggs, Professor Triggs, sorry, were you shocked by the proposition?
I was deeply shocked.
Can you tell us why?
Well, I've been a practicing lawyer for 46 years. So far as I'm aware, I have never had any suggestion of impropriety or work that was not of the appropriate standard, and my career has been a very fortunate one, as I've grown in the law and been able to practice law in various ways, whether in commercial legal practice, in the academic world, running a research institute, or as Dean of a faculty. Throughout all of those 46 years, I have never, ever had a suggestion that my work was not of an appropriate standard. And indeed, I'd only ever had remarks that confirmed the quality of my work. So when, not knowing the agenda of the Secretary's meeting with me on the 3rd of February, I was, of course, both surprised and very shocked that my resignation should be asked for. Obviously, it's the first time in my career that anyone's ever asked my resignation, so that was obviously a very difficult thing for me to deal with.
So I should, just to take you through, so how was the request for the resignation early in the meeting?
It was virtually immediately.
Right.
I mean, there were a couple of minutes of courtesies, and then he really went straight to the point.
Right. And did you, what was your, you declined, you've given evidence about, was that immediate, your response?
Yes.
And what reason did you give?
Well, and the reason I gave for declining was that I have a statutory position that is explicitly legislated to protect the independence of the Commission, but most importantly, the independence of the President. And that was my fundamental reason, and I didn't really need to elaborate on that to any degree.
And does that remain your view, that a resignation at the Attorney's request would impinge the independence of the Commission?
Yes, I think it would. It's far more than me that's at risk here. It is the integrity and future independence of a very important statutory commission in Australia, and one that has an A status within the Paris Principles and the United Nations. And were that status to be reduced in any way, that independence to be threatened, then that would not only threaten the very important role that we play in Australia, but it would threaten the capacity to perform at the A status level within the United Nations system and regionally.
Has the Attorney, you've met the Attorney on a number of occasions,
I
assume.
have.
Yes, and on any of those occasions prior to Mr Moraitis indicating to you that the Attorney required your resignation, has the Attorney expressed such views to you?
Never. And indeed, in his speech on the 10th of December, he had been very generous in commending the work of the Commission, the work of the Commissioners within the Commission, and of me personally. So we were, I think, all very, very gratified indeed, firstly, that the Attorney had come to this event, and secondly, that he'd spoken so warmly of the work of the Commission and of me.
That wasn't the speech you prepared for him, though, was it?
It was not.
That's meant to be like comic relief.
Yes, it was.
They were remarks that I made extemporaneously, and
I'm sorry that so much.
Forget it.
I'm sorry,
Forget it.
Professor Triggs, that so much uncharitable is being said about you. Can I, and has the Attorney subsequently expressed the same view that Mr Moraitis expressed to you?
No.
Have you had any conversation with the Attorney about this matter?
No.
Can I turn now to the, and I'm sorry, I don't know that I wrote it down, some other opportunity, I think was the phrase you used, is that right? Right. I'm just trying to get the sequence here. So after pleasantries, Mr Moraitis says to you, I'm here because the Attorney requires your resignation,
Or the Attorney would like your resignation. I don't remember the exact
Sure.
phrase.
You say no, you indicate why. At which point in that discussion is there an indication of other opportunities?
Oh, I think very early on. In other words, it was raised as being something that the Secretary was aware was being offered.
Were the two linked in the conversation?
Oh, yes, definitely.
So the conversation, I want to be very clear because it's a very serious allegation. That that your resignation was sought and it was linked to the offer of some unspecified further work with the Commonwealth.
Yes, there's no doubt in my mind that the two were connected.
Did you explore, was there any more detail given about what other work would be offered?
No, but I rejected it out of hand. I thought it was a disgraceful proposal.
Can you tell me why?
Because I have a 5-year statutory protection, and to suggest that I should, in the light of the political environment and the concerns about the inquiry, should quietly step down and take another position that might reflect my skills, I thought was an entirely inappropriate offer to make to someone who has a position that is designed to prevent that kind of proposal.
Did you understand it to be an inducement?
I prefer not to use that term, but especially as it is a term of legal art. And at that time, I would not have been thinking along those lines at all. But I certainly, in a layman's sense, saw it as a basis for motivation. It would be a reason that somebody might agree to resign their position and knowing that they would be perhaps secure in some other position. That was obviously running through my mind. But as, again, for the reasons I've explained, the very idea of resigning would threaten the entire reputation and independence of the Commission in a way which would have dramatic effect, not only on me, but on all of the Commission, and particularly the place of the Commission in the processes of human rights protection in Australia.
Was it an upsetting meeting, Professor Triggs?
It was upsetting, yes. I was certainly very shaken and very shocked.
Getting enough of that from the...
Thank you, Chair.
Your bell went, Chair.
Chair?
No. Look, I chair the committee how I like, but as I explained for the second time, I set the watch for 14 minutes to allow a minute or so to finish the question and for the answer to come. So leave that with me. I'll be able to handle that. Thanks for all your help, but from you too, Senator O'Sullivan. Have you finished?
I'm happy to continue, but I thought that was an appropriate break. And
Okay, well, if you've finished there, I'll go to...
We're not finished, we'll come back.
We'll come back.
Well, under the standing order, we can be here at 11 o'clock. Senator Hanson-Young.